Um, all right. So yeah, right before I hit record, we were just talking about 2020. So I'm curious, Alex. You've released three films during this treacherous year. Care to tell us how that's been for you?
Um, yeah, below the waist, I'm actually in bed, in my pajamas. So, I'll just go back to sleep when this is over. Look, it's not by design. I don't think 2020 was by anyone sane's design. Certainly not mine. It's all been the result of years and years of work. Bill and Ted 3 was over 10 years in the making, and Showbiz Kids was the doc I wanted to make after Downloaded, also 10 years ago. And Zappa, we've been on for 6 years. So it really was just a stacked up tarmac, basically.
Like,
And then you add COVID to that, and you kind of blow the tarmac up. So yeah, Zappa was supposed to be a world premiere at South by back in March. That film's actually been done for a little while,
right.
and obviously with COVID, really took off like the about 2 days before our premiere. So press screenings had gone out, and we were all ready to go. And it was really, obviously I was more concerned about everyone in my family being alive
Of
for a
course.
little while, but the obvious aside, it was a pretty heartbreaking because we were we were going to take the movie all over the world, and it's a big labor of love for us. So with Bill and Ted, honestly, I think given the circumstances, it was the right decision. I think that we all felt very within our camp felt very strongly that the fans shouldn't wait anymore. They'd waited
Sure.
so long.
Sure.
We're a little bitty movie with a lot of awareness, which is a somewhat precarious place to be because all these Marvel movies that got moved off their schedule down the road. If we'd have done the same thing, like, hey, we're like you, we're not like them, right?
Right. Right. Right.
we're
Sure.
not we're not all like them. So we would have found ourselves just crushed like by dinosaurs. And so we took a gamble that folks would warm up to the film, in difficult times watching it at home. And as heartbreaking as it was not to do a big theatrical rollout, I think that was very much the right move.
Yeah.
And I'm really
Everybody
happy.
came out for sure.
Yeah, I'm happy with the response. We're all very happy with the response. So, yeah, it's funny. I spent Thanksgiving with Keanu. He's about the only other person that I can pod with. And we were sitting in a turkey hangover yesterday, looking at each other like in a haze, going, "Did we make the movie? We did, right? Did it come out? It did, right? Okay, okay. Just making sure."
Right. Fuck. Yeah, my directorial debut came out in July, so on a very minor level, I feel your pain. Um,
Yeah,
but I
yeah,
can't imagine having three films culminate in right now. But
yeah.
without stewing on the circumstances, so I mean, when one sets out to make a documentary, obviously it's a personal project if you're about to sign up for years of work. So why is Zappa such a personal subject for you?
I think there's a lot of reasons, just like there's a lot of Zappa. Glenn Zipper and I, my producer, we were finishing up Deep Web, the film we'd spent
Yeah,
years
well,
immersed in. Yeah, thank you. Very heavy subject and very immersive. I'd gone down this rabbit hole thinking I was going to make this kind of surfacey Bitcoin movie and then got all caught up in Ross Ulbricht's case with the Silk Road,
right.
which I'm glad we did. And it's a very important story. I'm glad that we got to be a part of that story. But we were looking to do something that was not in tech and not, preferably involving people losing their lives right in front of us in real time.
Jeez.
And we were wondering why no one had done the Zappa story, frankly. I grew up a fan. I wouldn't call myself, what people think of as an Uber Zappa fan, meaning knowing every single intricacy of every 100 plus
Right.
album backwards and forwards. But I grew up in the 70s. He was extremely captivating to me. His wit, his politics, his musical genius. But I love contradictory doc subjects. It's just
Yeah.
that's my thing. I like making films about people that are not black and white, and Zappa is that writ large. And he lived in times that were also very interesting to me. And to me, it was a possibility of a way into everything from, the post-beat, early radical generation that he exemplified pre-punk but post Burroughs and Kesey.
And how
Uh,
punk his avant-garde nature was.
yeah, exactly. I mean, it really was. Talking to someone about that the other day, just about punk and Zappa, and and you don't equate the two, but of course,
Right.
once you dig into him, they're extremely similar. And
Well, in
I don't think
attitude, it doesn't really get more punk than Zappa.
it really doesn't. I mean, it's the big middle finger. Literally, that was his iconic pose to
Right.
absolutely everything and everyone. And um, but it was also ran deeper than that. He put his money where his mouth was in terms of his politics, in terms of his musical taste, his work ethic, obviously. But then at this point in his life, he turned and ran headlong at political issues that meant something to him, which is really inspiring. So it's just absolutely incredible story, but about a type of character that I do find compelling. I can spend years with someone that's that dualistic. That's kind of my
Right.
thing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I read in I don't know, other interviews, Amit maybe saying that a lot of people tried to pitch the film, as you were saying, why hadn't this story been told for so long? And it was because obviously the Zappa estate were very protective of their wonderful figurehead. So how did you squeak through? What was the pitch like? What was that
I
conversation?
think it's one of those things they talk about in sales. Like you're always in the best position when you don't care if you actually make the sale or not. And it's not like I didn't care, but
Sure.
Gail's reputation was so formidable that I honestly did not think there was a snowball's chance in hell she was going to say yes. So I really
Right.
didn't care. I just went in and we had this really lovely, quite deep conversation about art and politics and activism and music. She had seen Deep Web and she really liked it, which was helpful. So we talked about kind of where things are today, both the crossover of the internet and activism and politics and crime and the government and you name it. All things that do reflect on Zappa in some
Right.
way. And overall, we became fast friends, and I ended up spending a lot of time up at the house. And I asked her that question myself because I was curious why us and why not other folks. And she just said that she really got a kind of a revolving door of people pitching the shaggy mustachioed weirdo with the guitar movie.
Right.
And she said it was either that or the kind of wild-eyed Zappa fanatic who wanted to make a 4-hour film about time signatures and
Right.
xenochrony. And neither of those things were of interest to her. I think she liked the fact that I was a huge admirer of his, but not a fanatical fan. I didn't even really get his music until I was in my 20s.
Yeah.
Um, but the secret sauce I realized was that my thesis was, I think, her secret thesis, which is I told her that I didn't think that Frank was a rock and roll musician at all. And I'd always my way into his music was when I kind of clocked that he was more of an avant-garde composer than a rock musician. Then his whole catalog became accessible to me, and she said that was very much her opinion as well. So I think there was a simpatico there.
Right. I would almost feel like as a documentary director taking on Zappa, you would have an anxiety attack thinking about the 100 plus hour recordings. I mean, did you have that feeling once you finally got the green light? Were you like, oh no?
My oh no wasn't from that.
Uh,
I didn't get to have that because she gave me access to the vault, and that was
right.
my immediate oh no. In
Yeah.
fact, it was more oh many expletives.
My next.
Look, it was what Gail said to me was that you can't really tell this intimate, interior driven story of Zappa with the material that exists in the world because he was so protective
Right.
of his image that it's not there. You're going to find the cocky, smirky Zappa that they'd made docs about before, who was all singing, all dancing, but not really showing any of his hand. And I didn't want that.
Of
I didn't
course.
mind having some of it because it's entertaining, but I didn't want to make that movie. And she said, you've got to use the vault media, but you're going to have to go through it, and you're going to have to. It's no one's done that other than with the commercially viable stuff, which of course they'd been very diligent about preserving
Yeah.
and working on for decades. And that was my oh shit moment because a it was vast, and b it was some of it was deteriorating.
Right.
So thus began a
Restoration
2 year.
process.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did a Kickstarter and raised money only to preserve media, and that's literally what I did for 2 years of my
Oh,
life with my whole staff. I literally had we used all these proprietary super professional companies,
yeah.
but
Yeah.
I also had a baking oven in my office, like on a table by the window, so I wouldn't get evicted. And I was literally baking 3/4 audio tapes around the clock for like a year
Wow.
myself. It was
Jeez.
insane.
Holy cow. I mean, that's so cool, particularly, for Kickstarter contributors. That's such a great cause because it's not just like Alex Winter's movie. It's about preserving this footage, and it's just something that the community that benefits the Zappa community. And so,
Yeah, I mean, it was an extremely stressful and time-consuming project, but really the gratitude goes to the 9,000 plus backers
yeah,
who rallied to preserve this media, and that media was saved onto drives that I could use for the film, but it was
sure.
also saved onto LTO archival tape to that's going into an institution for posterity.
Awesome.
It did, we did do what we set out to do, and I'm really, really happy about that.
Right.
There was a scary moment, a little synaptic break between when that process was done, and I went, okay, now I got to find someone to give me an enormous amount of money to make a Frank Zappa documentary, and I had zero
Right.
at that time. I did not want to have to go to the backers and say, I love you guys, but project ends now.
Yeah. Right. This is the real project.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
that's cool. So for years, you're sifting through this footage. What are some of the archival pieces that you just got so excited about including in your film, and just that journey of getting to have this vault revealed to you bit by bit?
I mean, look, every day was discovery, every single day. Mike Nichols and Mike came
Oh,
on from the very beginning,
no way.
long before we were financed. Was
Oh,
that?
I didn't. Mike Nichols.
Yeah. Do you know him?
No, no, I am thinking of the filmmaker Mike Nichols who has passed. I
Oh, no, no,
was the
no,
same
no.
Mike Nichols.
Yeah.
Okay,
No,
just
Mike Nichols, the editor. Yeah, he had worked
right.
on Echo in the Canyon and
Ah,
the
okay,
bunch of docs that I really
right.
loved. He was
Yeah,
the editor. Mike came on from the very beginning, and we started sifting through all the material together, and it was pretty jaw-dropping. There were different kind of buckets of revelations. There was the holy shit, that's Jimi Hendrix backstage at the Royal Albert Hall, or there's him and Eric Clapton hanging out, or him and Joni Mitchell. The kind of obvious low-hanging fruit holy shit
sure,
moment you
sure.
get when you're working on
Marquee
somebody's
names,
vault.
whatever. Yeah,
Exactly. Yeah. Like, there's that stuff.
yeah.
But the stuff that really moved me the most was twofold. One, the really intimate personal stuff of Zappa's that was there all the way back to the beginning of his life,
Yeah.
working on 8 millimeter and Super 8 rewinds when he was like 12, 13 years old, recutting footage of his parents and making really beautiful short films, and then watching that evolution into writing out orchestral compositions at like
Hmm.
15,
Mhm.
still like maybe a junior in high school, before he got into blues with
Right.
Don Van Vliet with Beefheart. I mean, just seeing that personal evolution firsthand, like finding, and remember, it's excavation. So it wasn't like, oh, let's pull out the Beefheart and Zappa in the kitchen stuff. It was like 8 mil, maybe
Yeah.
1950. It was like that.
Right.
And you send it to be preserved, and they'd be like, well, we saved the video, the visual, but we couldn't save the audio, or we found half of it. We don't know where the other half is, and we would keep going, and then like a year later, we'd find the other half. And it went on like that. So that was a really revelatory process. But really hearing Zappa firsthand, all of that audio and visual of him in the basement riffing from the '60s to his death in the early '90s, just intimate firsthand perspective, that really made the film work for us.
Yeah. Yeah. And you get so much. I mean, one of the reasons your film is such a unique look is you get the personal angle. You get Gail reflecting on what it's like to be the other woman, or the main woman, and that
Yeah.
interview with Zapp on the bench. I mean, what is that interview with Zapp on the bench, speaking directly to, you
I
know,
think it's from some Dutch thing that was shot, or I mean, we literally we found so much
right.
media, and obviously we didn't stop at the vault media, or we would find a piece of something in the vault media, and then we would get the rest of it.
Hmm,
And that's the detective work that you just do making any documentary. But we would find like a bit of the Yellow Shark performance, but we'd be missing one camera angle that gave
hmm,
us something. And
right.
thus would begin a 2, sometimes 3 or 4 year investigation into who had that master and if we could get that master from them. And and you that was like times 1,000 because it would be like that for all these different pieces, like him at the Garrick Theater, or,
Right.
you know,
My favorite.
mine too. I mean, that
Right.
was the media I was most. It was the very first question I asked Gail when I sat down with her, was if she knew if there was Garrick stuff down there, because that's
Right.
my personal favorite
Yeah.
period. And the idea of a music artist who just installs himself in a theater, unlike the Beatles in Hamburg, not just tunesmithing every night, but literally just doing
Audience
whatever
abuse.
I mean, 10 hours of whatever the hell they want with the audience
Right.
until he figures out his artistic identity. That's like, there's no other story like that in the annals of
Right.
popular music, not even close. So that was gold for me. The other thing that was gold for me was I'd never been able to find any footage of the Sunset Strip in the 60s of any value. It
Right.
was always just horrendous, like, crappy, like archival, non-copyright, just garbage,
Right. Some
Cadillac driving
street
down
shot.
Hollywood.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, just the worst.
You got in the
And
whiskey.
yeah, we got in the whiskey, we got the lines around the block, we got the Harley Davidsons driving down the street at midnight. Like, it was,
Yeah.
you really feel what that vibe was like. And
Right.
that was just really jaw-dropping for us.
Yeah, yeah. I think what I love about the Garrick so much, that period, I guess the adjoining record for that period would have been absolutely free.
That's right. Yeah.
So, I mean, that says it all, right? I mean,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's post Freak Out, and it's like, the album didn't do as incredibly well as we wanted it to, so let's get the hell out of Dodge and go find ourselves, and that's
get
what they did.
invisible again.
Yeah,
That's where the magic happens, when nobody's paying attention, when nobody thinks you're freak out, I guess.
yeah,
Um,
exactly. It's sort of the inverse, just to riff off your sweatshirt there. It's the inverse of what Neil Young did in a way, It's the not driving your car off the ditch into a ditch after a hit.
right,
It's like let's actually get out of this sort of thing we're in and go pull the clay apart and rebuild
right,
it into something else. And let's take our I mean, Zappa was very painstaking, so he really took his time to do that. They did not come back until they were ready.
right, exactly. Utmost readiness was his thing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I love how, like the kings of pop music, the Beatles, are like influenced by Freak Out, and they turn around and just make fun of that influence,
Yeah.
essentially.
Yeah.
So why don't you tell
Yeah.
me a little bit about the original footage you were able to gather? Like the Ruth Underwood footage is like my highlight. That's my gold mine.
Yeah, I mean, I got to meet Ruth. I was at the house quite a bit for all of the last year of Gail's life, and Ruth would bring food by for
Cool.
Gail,
Oh,
sort of organic food and things that she could eat as and,
lifelong
be.
friends.
Yeah, exactly, and just
Cool.
was the sweetest. I was a little starstruck because Ruth was actually one of those people who I had kind of studied on my own as a Zappa fan.
Yeah.
There's a lot of like videos on YouTube of her giving testimonials about, everything from Zappa's time signatures to life
Right.
on the road. And
Right.
I always found her very articulate, very warm, a great combination of like a real serious, Juilliard trained musician and just someone who was very blunt and
Yeah.
honest. So that was also, all of the interviews for us were very intimate and very moving. And I didn't have a lot of interviews intentionally. We really, the way we built the movie, I had all the stuff of Gail's that I shot, on my own dime way before the film was financed, and she
Yeah.
was unfortunately had passed long before we
Right.
started the doc.
And she knew
So
she knew she didn't have too much time left.
yeah, she didn't know she had that little time left. She thought she was going to see the film through with me and be there for the premiere, and suddenly she took a turn and was in hospice and gone, and that all happened quite quickly. So we were lucky that we had that footage of her. And what had started for me as more of a research process was, let me just start filming my chats with Gail so that I've got audio for the conversations, became the bedrock interviews of her in the film.
Right.
Uh, but honestly, everybody was really vital, and we did it in inverse to the way I would normally work, where we kind of were building the movie, and we would even create like fake narration that either I would do or Mike would do, and then we would go find interview subjects to fill those
Right.
holes.
Right. Right. Right.
So it was kind of backwards because the film was sort of structured around Frank's archival, and they were
Yeah.
like, "Oh, well, Steve, I could speak to this. He was there at this time, or Ruth could speak to this, or Bunk,
Right.
or whatever." And that's how we sought out the interviews.
Is that a tactic carried over from your other documentaries? Is that something that works across the board?
It can. I'd never done it quite like this. For Showbiz Kids, it was similar in that I wanted a really small ensemble of people from across time speaking
Mhm.
in almost one sentence.
Right.
But I have to say, I learned that a bit from Zappa, meaning I had started Zappa already, and what was great about the way Frank told stories, and everyone does this to a degree, but when you're dealing in someone's vault material,
Mhm.
we would do a string out of a story. Say him telling the story about being about the sex tape and getting thrown in jail,
Right.
right at the
Yeah.
at Studio
The
Z.
stag tape.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
and he would start telling that story in, I don't know, the mid 60s on audio that we had. He would continue to tell it in the 70s, change it slightly, but keep going in the 80s and finish it in the 90s. And we would use that as one sentence.
Amazing.
Um, and it was incredible. And it really gave you this kind of expansive sense. We wouldn't pretend it was one. We would show you that this is across, we do a hard cut at one point from, I think, the 70s to the 90s in the middle of a sentence.
Right.
So we're clear with the audience what we're up to. But this idea of one story being told across time was very inspiring for me, and I kind of framed the whole Showbiz Kids movie around that idea of like this is one story from a
Spiral
child actor.
situation.
Exactly, they just happen to be eight different people from 100 years old to
Right.
10.
What was the name of the original child actor who's being thrown around by everybody? What was her name?
Jackie Coogan?
Jackie, who lived to be 101 years old, was
Oh
it?
no, that was Diana Sarah Carey. Yes.
Okay. I guess there were two in the early turn of the century.
Yeah, but only one in our film. Yeah, that was Diana. She was amazing. Absolutely amazing. Baby Peggy was her name.
Maybe.
Yeah.
All right, right on. Well, I
Yeah.
feel like I've taken enough of your time today, even though I have a bunch more questions. So whatever, just as a Zappa fan, I want to thank you for your film and
Oh, thank you.
just congratulations on all your output this year and in general.
Great. Thanks, man. I am now going to sleep.
All right, do that. Good night, Alex. Pleasure to meet you.
All right. See you later.
Bye.
Thanks, Zach.
Thank you, Tiffany. See ya.